Well, hi, I'm Ben Felder, news director of The Oklahoman. Joining me is Chris Castile, The Oklahoman's federal government reporter. And Chris, it is officially fall. It's getting colder, which means we are a year away from election day across the country, presidential election. There are going to be some state questions. But here in Oklahoma City, maybe one of the most interesting House races in the United States is going to be taking place as Democrat Kendra Horn looks to defend a seat that she flipped 2 years ago. I've got a story Sunday kind of taking a look at some of the areas that she won, a part of the 5th District, particularly some of the suburban areas that are going to be the key for her to pick up. But, you know, she has conducted herself as a moderate in some ways. If you're a Republican, you think she's a Pelosi liberal. If you're a Democrat, or at least some Democrats feel like maybe she's been a pretty conservative Democratic lawmaker. You've covered her quite a bit in her first year in office. You know, based on her votes, based on the position she's taking, how would you describe her? Where would you put her on the political spectrum?
It's tough. I mean, and I think that you nailed it. I mean, it just depends on where you are on the spectrum with Congresswoman Horn. I mean, she's taken some votes that, you know, were by Oklahoma, even by Oklahoma Democratic standards, kind of surprising. The ones on offshore drilling and ANWR drilling, where she voted against it. You know, I couldn't find a single Oklahoma Democrat who'd ever done that, you know, going back. But she's walked a line on impeachment. She voted against a minimum wage hike. I mean, there have been votes where, you know, I think the liberal base in Oklahoma City has probably been kind of disappointed in her, to say the least.
Yeah, some are disappointed. I definitely talked to some of those in my story for Sunday. Some are understanding, saying, hey, we know what it's going to take to retain this seat, which is still has more registered Republicans than registered Democrats. You know, one of the key issues that she spoke on this week that you reported on was on Medicare for all, which is a part of some of the presidential candidates, Democratic candidates for president. That's a major part of their platform. She said that wasn't something she was in favor of.
No, she's not for it now. She's among those, and you know, it's all the presidential candidates are not of the same mind on this. Or, you know, Joe Biden, Klobuchar, I think Harris. Have all talked about the need to basically retain the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act structure that includes private insurance companies, and that's where she's at. She just thinks this overhaul, where you put everybody into the same system, the system itself could suffer from it. You know, it wouldn't necessarily mean more care, for better care, or even access to care for some people that were put into this. Public, it's a single payer system. You know, they keep calling it Medicare for all. It's a single payer government system. Yeah,
probably the biggest issue she's going to have to navigate is impeachment. Impeachment inquiry is underway in the House. As you reported, she has said that she wasn't in favor of the official inquiry. We'll see if it gets to an impeachment vote and where she would land on that as more information comes out. But talk about just kind of what she's having to navigate through these impeachment waters as she goes into an election year.
Well, she's navigating the politics of it. She's navigating that district that you talked about, and the one where, you know, the Republicans refer to as the accidental congresswoman. You know, she upset two-term incumbent Steve Russell in a district that still is not majority, but I mean the plurality is Republican of the 5th District, which includes most of Oklahoma County, Seminole, and Pottawatomie counties. So she's navigating the politics of a district that is, we haven't even seen that it's purple yet. You know, it could have been just, as a pollster said, just kind of one fluke year. We'll see, but she's one of only about 10 Democrats who hasn't just come out and said, yeah, we should do an impeachment inquiry. You know, I'm not sure about the numbers on Democrats who say I'm ready to impeach. I mean, that's you know, step beyond where you know the Democratic House Democrats are right now. So I think she's going to have to continue to kind of. She's basically said, I'm going to wait to see what comes out of this, and then we'll go from there. And she really can't say anything more than that, I don't think, at this point. You know, I mean, the judiciary, the intelligence committees are still, you know, trying to get witnesses, trying to get documents. So, you know, her premise, or her basic, her position is that it's irresponsible to say I'd be ready to impeach at this point.
Yeah, as you said, Republicans will say, hey, she just got lucky, it was a fluke that she won. Horn supporters would say, no, I mean, she worked hard. She ran against an incumbent who didn't appear to be as active in his district, not just during the election, but even just as visible, to his
Sometimes seem
constituents.
disinterested, yeah.
She really worked some of the suburban communities that were so key for the Democrats as a large across the country. And it's something that we've talked about before and reported on, is that you had a Democratic candidate for governor in Drew Edmondson that really appealed to households that were really focused on education. She seemed to kind of line up a little bit with where he was successful in suburban communities in northwest Oklahoma City and in Edmond. Those are going to be key for her. If she's going to retain this seat, it's going to be key for her. Does she risk alienating or turning off Democrats? I mean, I've talked to some Democratic voters, including one that said, if she's not going to vote for impeachment, I don't know that I really am that excited about her. But do those voters risk going to the Republican candidate? I would think surely not.
No, I don't think so either. And I think to get back to your first point about where she won, I think she did, in order for her to have won last year, she had to have gotten Republican votes. And you did a story focusing more on the Edmondson-Stitt angle in some of those kind of northwest, covering Deer Creek, Edmond, and mainly talking to women was my memory of that. Republican women who had been voting Republican who went for Edmondson, who were ready to go for Edmondson because of education. Drew Edmondson, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate last year. I think some of those same women are anti-Trump people. I just don't think a lot of those women could bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump for a number of reasons. So I think she's going to get some of those votes again. But as far as like these disappointed Democrats or whatever, I mean, good point. I mean, are they, let's say Medicaid expansion is on the fall ballot next year. Is on the November, the state question on Medicaid expansion is on the November ballot. Do those people sit out then? Do they stay away from the polls then? I understand at least the intellectual argument that why should I go vote for president because Oklahoma's a red state and it's going to get every electoral vote. Right, that's correct. Trump would. They're not going to vote for a Democrat for president, we don't think.
Probably, yeah.
But what about Medicaid expansion? Are they going to stay home and not vote for that? Or what other state questions may wind up on? There were a bunch of them last year.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not hard to find Democrats who support Trump in Oklahoma. That's, southeastern Oklahoma and western Oklahoma, especially in the southeast. But Democrats here in the 5th District who are more urban and more suburban, you have to think that even though they may not be ecstatic about Horn not being as zealous on impeachment, or even if she were to, not vote for an impeachment, they're going to have plenty of things on the ballot to turn out for. You said expansion, but also the president itself. And yes, maybe some will say, well, what's the point? But I think some will be energized to go and at least cast a vote against the president. Some Republicans will be energized to vote to defend him.
And once Horn gets an opponent, through the next few months, and it's really closer than the fall because we've got the Republican primary will be next June, and then undoubtedly a runoff, considering all the people in that Republican side of the CD5 race. They're going to have to embrace Trump, just hug him as tight as they can, probably. At least I think that will be the approach of most of them. It has been so far, including on impeachment, to win that Republican electorate, these stalwart Trump supporters that'll turn out next June to vote in this thing, especially the runoff. So these people that may feel disenchanted with, these Democrats who may feel disenchanted with Horn after the next 6 to 8 months of Republican, candidates embracing Trump in every single policy of his and railing against Horn for supporting, whatever impeachment, she winds up supporting, if they'll be ready to vote for Kendra Horn.
Yeah. A lot of those, particularly female suburban voters that I talked to a couple of years ago ahead of the governor's race, a lot of them were focused on Edmondson. A lot of them were actively campaigning for Edmondson. These were registered Republicans, but education was such a big deal. A lot of them had participated in the teacher walkouts, and they felt like Edmondson was the one. I mean, he was the one that was promising an increase in education funding and teacher pay raises. I mean, Stitt was too, but was being embraced in ways that they wanted through Edmondson. A lot of them didn't mention Trump as being a factor because they were focused on the gubernatorial race. But I talked to some of those same suburban women voters, some of the same voters and some of the same in the same circle, and a lot of them did bring up Trump this time around. And they felt like, one, that I quoted in the story said, I just feel like at least having Horn up there, even though I'm a registered Republican, I find Trump to be so horrific that having a Democratic House at least provides some checks and balance. I think the exact quote was, at least it makes him less horrific.
That's actually a good point too. I mean, if there's not, I haven't seen much talk about Republicans regaining the House next year. I think their odds are kind of long on that, especially because they've lost so many. They're losing so many veteran people. Some of those seats will be competitive, especially in Texas. But if there were some kind of national argument about if we can beat Kendra Horn, Republicans take over the House, and you've got people with the sentiment that you're talking about who want that sort of check on presidential power if they're worried, about Trump being reelected, that actually could probably help Horn with some of those people.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that, as you said, it's going to depend on what Republican challenger emerges as the nominee. A lot of people that I've talked to, political observers, consultants, just voters, tend to think that maybe State Senator Stephanie Bice would be the best challenger. And the reason they say that is, I think, one, having a female on the ticket. But Bice is someone who is a Republican, but is kind of come across as somewhat of a moderate. She's not someone that traditionally has just waved the banner of social issues. She was instrumental in alcohol reform,
right.
Which is maybe not that controversial of a subject in many parts of the country, but in some parts of conservative Oklahoma, it's still seen as rather progressive to push. But as you say, to navigate that primary, that Republican primary, she's going to have to come.
Mick Cornett was seen that way too until he got in the governor's race and embraced all of Trump's positions. Said he would sign permitless carry. Said he's all the way with Trump on immigration and every other issue that you could come up with. He was with Trump on that. All of a sudden, a lot of these people in Oklahoma City, even though he won Oklahoma County, we should say, before he got beat in the runoff. I think there was a lot of surprise about that, and I think Bice could be a similar situation with Bice.
Yeah.
That a lot of people that thought she was like this Mick Cornett, David Holt, in that sort of group. Well, she's not going to be able to be that in a Republican primary. She's going to have to be a Republican.
Yeah, and if she were to emerge, and a couple of voters said this to me, and I don't know if the majority of the electorate will think through it this way, but some that lived in Stephanie Bice's Senate district and are also in CD5, because there is some overlap, who had said, some of these Republican women voters I talked to said, I really like Kendra Horn. I want to vote for her again. I really like Senator Bice. I think she's doing a good job. I want to keep her where she's at. And who knows how wide of a view that is, but it doesn't mean that a vote for, if it was a Horn versus Bice race, you may have some voters that are like, I like them both. I want to keep them where they're at.
She's also, Bice is going to be facing at least 3 candidates who will outspend her, will have a lot more money than her. Terry Neese, Janet Barisi,
which changes
and David Hill, the businessman who just announced last week kind of a soft launch of his campaign. He will also have money. So she's the only one with a political base. She's the only one who's won an election in the last few years, and she's got a good base inside the county or inside the congressional district where she'll be running, but I don't think she'll have the resources they do.
Yeah. Well, real quick, you mentioned some of these candidates. Janet Barisi is a former state superintendent who lost in a Republican primary when she was seeking re-election.
Finished
she lost
third.
to Joy Hoffmeister. Finished third. I think one thing's going to be fascinating to watch with Barisi is we talk about, especially that Edmond, Deer Creek, Northwest Oklahoma City area, education is so important. And Barisi has education chops, but it may not be the positions that are really widely supported in these areas. In fact, we saw a lot of, she lost in that primary, and Hoffmeister has a lot of support and did very well in some of these suburban communities that really saw her as a champion for education funding and supporting schools. So I think it'd just be really fascinating to see how Barisi would do. But you're right, she'll be well resourced. Yeah, and then finally, we've mentioned Mick Cornett. You reported this week that it seems unlikely that he's going to run in CD5. He's been rumored, but apparently he's been calling.
Yeah, apparently he put to rest, whatever talk remained. There were a lot of people that already kind of decided he wasn't going to run. I've been hearing for months that he was going to decide in the fall. We're in the fall. So last week you had Barisi get in. You had David Hill with kind of a soft launch of his campaign. You've got some pretty heavy hitters in there in terms of resources and name recognition in the community. He still would have been formidable in that race. He probably might have cleared some of them out, actually, but he did let everybody know this week I'm told by multiple people in kind of the Republican infrastructure here that he called to say I'm not running.
Yeah, a long-term and by many accounts a successful mayor of Oklahoma City. Obviously wasn't ecstatic about losing in the primary and the runoff, and probably wouldn't be too eager to go into another.
No, and he actually lost in a runoff running for CD5 before
this race again
in
when
2006. Got beat by Mary
councilor.
Fallon.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be so much to watch in the CD5 race. We know that you're on top of it. Like I said, I've got a story in Sunday's Oklahoman that takes a closer look at the suburban voters that Horn is trying to retain as she seeks re-election in 2020. With Chris, I'm Ben. Thanks for joining us.